Well, greetings out there in YouTube land. Thanksgiving's over and now it's time to get back into the video biz. And what better way than with this behemoth that you see before you. The tale of its acquisition you might find interesting. A viewer from New Mexico was on his way through town on Interstate 10 and asked me if I would be interested in a old Silvertone amp that he was going to contribute to the channel. I figured it was one of those little transformerless, throwaway junkers, but just as an opportunity to meet a viewer and all, I thought, why not? So we got together at a local restaurant, chatted for a while, and then he opened the trunk, and I almost fainted when I saw this in the trunk. As with a lot of old amps, it's a combination of really good and really bad. It's a Silvertone 1485, which was the biggest, fattest, loudest, meanest, most expensive one that they ever made, I believe. It's 120 watts with 4 6L6s, and believe it or not, in this cabinet there are 6 10-inch Jensen C10Q speakers. That alone makes it remarkable for those of us who have always been in awe of the early Fender amps like the Concert and the Bassman that had 4 10-inch speakers. And this jewel has 6. And they didn't skimp either. They're real original Jensen C10Qs. But the downside of all this is the condition is absolutely hideous. Okay, it's the second worst amp in condition that I've ever worked on. So let's take it out to the workshop and begin to dissect it so that we can see the good, the bad, and the ugly that came with the mighty Silvertone 1485. This may take a few minutes because I'll have to hire a moving and storage company to move this behemoth out into my small and cluttered workshop. Well, the movers were just too expensive, so I got Jack to help me drag the head here out into the workshop where we can start to check it out. First off, I know that we're always looking for white spots on top, and this takes the cake. I have no earthly idea what this is or where it came from. It may be styrofoam. I don't know why it'd be glued on the outside of the cabinet. Also, I probably need to go wash my hands and submit a sample of this to the Center for Disease Control just to make sure it's not anthrax or something like that. Also, then we will focus on this hideous padded Naugahyde that's been stapled all over the surface of this, and as we'll see in a little while, the speaker cabinet. Somebody must have been channeling, no pun intended, custom amps or something when they did this. But we can hope that underneath is the original grill cloth. If you look down here in the corner, there where the staple still holding foam, you can see original material down here, and let's hope that the whole thing has a really nice original covering on it that we can expose once we remove this unknown substance and this hideous padded Naugahyde. Next, let's look here at the dashboard. Sears Silvertone, 6 speakers, and you can see the metal's in not terrible shape. The problem with this is that when you start removing all the grunge and fingerprints, you also start removing the silk screening. So you have to be super careful. Also, the knobs are not all present, and they're not all in good shape. This one's broken here. This one's been crushed in a couple places. Crushed, fair, missing, and a couple decent ones. Now, the utter shock was I thought, well, I'll just order one of these knobs. First off, if you look on Reverb, there are people charging like $40 a piece for these knobs. Fortunately, I found a viewer who would sell me several replacement knobs. They're used knobs. They're probably on the order of this one here, but for half price. Okay, so I really appreciate that, and those knobs are on the way. I'll probably use the, I ordered 3 of them, so one for here, and then maybe replace the 2 crushed or broken knobs, and hope for the best. This bottom panel seems to have held up very well. Channel 1, indicator light, channel 2, foot switch, and then these toggles with the red rubber coverings. I'm not sure why, unless it was to prevent you from getting shocked from touching metal. I mean, maybe it was like a little safety feature. Sure, the Underwriter Labs would be thrilled. This one, you need a breaker bar to activate. And of course, once I install the 3-wire power cord, it won't be necessary. Okay, you can see some of the lovely upholstery work that's been done on this. Okay, so that's the covering of the head cabinet and the front panel. It looks like this will be salvageable. Let's turn it around and check out the inside. And as I turn it around, I rejoice over the presence of the nice original hand. The first thing we notice when we turn it around is the charming, like 3 light years here of tangled, wretched, cracking electrical wire, plugs, and a speaker connection wire. I think you can guess where this is going to end up. Okay, so now let's sit down and take a look inside. First off, no tubes at all. And when you have, what is this, 5, 4, and 5, when you have 10 tubes missing, you know this is not going to be an inexpensive proposition. Okay, 4 6L6s, and then we look back here, this is an output transformer. They're not known to be particularly durable transformers, evidenced by the fact that the second of the 2 output transformers is missing. This transformer will be for this pair of 6L6s. This one was for this pair of 6L6s. Fortunately, Weber and Silvertone and a few other places make replicas, and also I'm in the process of trying to hunt down and obtain a really nice original output transformer to install here. Looking at the unknown substances which have adhered to the back of this cabinet, some of it is rust, some of it is, God only knows, unidentified biological material. Maybe a ricochet from a groupie undies or something coming in from the back, who knows. The original pots, massive and kind of rusty and scary looking power transformer that is strangely tilted to the right, which makes me think this thing was dropped on this side, and this massive, like, I don't know what this is, 10 or 12 pounds of iron here managed to tilt a little from the impact. I'm going to bet this is no good anymore, but at least it's present, the old can filter cap. Some more candidates for deoxit here along the front panel. And here is one of the stranger aspects of this type of Silvertone amp, and that is this weird little kind of spring-mounted reverb tank. They're not really noted for their wonderful reverb effect. However, I guess when they're up and running, it's at least passable. And let's hope that this one is intact. If not, we'll have to come up with some other resolution, because we know that all big amps have to have reverb. Now, as far as the missing tube complement over here on the preamp side, we have a pair of 6 FQ7s, okay, which I do not have. I've never had an amp that used them, so I've ordered a nice NOS pair of these tubes, and then 3 12AX7s, which I do have in stock, so I'll be able to replace these tubes, and also I'll need to get 3 of the tube shields. These are not the type that lock in, that drop down and twist. These are the ones that are just held in by kind of the resistance here of this base. I don't know if I have any. If any of you all have any, let me know, but I'm going to try to hunt down the tube shields. It's got the Sears Roebuck part number plate here on the back. Model 1485 amplifier, Sears Roebuck and Company. And over here, a nice fuse holder, and then one of the old type of microphone inputs. Okay, right here, convenience outlet and speaker and power cord inlets here through the chassis with the strain reliefs. Okay, so that's about it from what we can see. Let's pull out the chassis and take a look inside. And let's also say a silent prayer that it's better than the outside. I removed the one remaining Phillips screw from the back of the panel, and then the two remaining of four quarter-inch screws that come up and go into T-nuts up here on the top of the chassis, and I think we're ready to pull it out. Well, it looks like stage 2 of the horror show. Apparently this was a little door here for a rat's nest which existed inside the chassis. God, let's hope that they didn't snack on insulation. Okay, it looks like they ate a bunch of seeds and no doubt showed their appreciation for their home by urinating all over the outside of it. Okay, I really probably need to don surgical gloves and mask to continue. But first off, I'm going to vacuum up all this mess here and then go get my hantavirus injections. You know, considering the high cost of nuts, I might want to pick out some of the better ones here for a little snack tray, okay, for Christmas, and then vacuum up the rest. Here's a quick self-portrait in case you think I was kidding about the surgical mask. Well, all the old feces and rotted food have been vacuumed up, and now we're just left with lots of urine residue to clean off the surfaces. In a way, it's much like cleaning up after a fraternity party. But let's not keep us in suspense any longer. I think we all want to flip this jewel over and see what the inside looks like. And finally, we have good news. Look at the interior of this. It's just pristine. Look at all the shielded cables they used. Let's go down the line. All of the capacitors appear to be original. All the old production numbers written on it, probably with crayon. This is one of those discoveries that almost makes up for all the bad ones. Okay, check it out. Complex, but unmolested, and I can live with that. Looks to me like there might have been some rat nibbling down here, and also over here there is a wire that's been completely removed, which is never a good thing. Okay, I don't know, maybe that was a little snack or something from one of the rats, but it's going to be a lot of fun trying to figure out where this went. There'll probably be more things like that in here, but at least no human has been in here to molest the innards, because in most cases they're far more destructive than rats. I know I probably should go in and get the speaker cabinet and dissect it, but while I have this out here, I'm going to clean up the whatever urine or whatever is on the floor, and then pop these staples and let's see what's underneath this god-awful covering. There we go. A little elbow grease and cleaner and a couple episodes of the dry heaves, and we've got the floor nice and clean, and look what I found. The ubiquitous white specks. Okay, so we know that this outer covering, while it might not be original, it's got that vibe. Also, it's going to be a real shame to wave goodbye to this conglomeration of nauseating substances. Okay, so let's start popping staples. Okay, I've removed a whole bunch of staples, and I'm starting to get excited. This is the bottom of it, which is probably going to be in real good shape, but it looks perfect. Now, there's no way the top can be this nice, but I just wanted to give you a little update. Now let's continue with the staple removal. Okay, after pulling out almost countless staples, look at the top. If anything, that hideous cover probably protected it. It's dirty, but I think it's going to clean up real nice. Also, the top joints have broken and are open on both sides, badly over here, and at the back rear. Now that's probably not going to be hard to fix, but I think some like 409 or some surface cleanser is going to clean up this top to where it will look just about like new. So that is a real positive step forward in the restoration of this poor old amp. Okay, here's after a preliminary cleaning with like Windex, and other than a couple spots which may be removable, it could almost pass for new. It's really in beautiful shape. What a nice discovery. And in the spirit of the holidays, I think it'd be a great idea to have a contest and see which viewer can guess the exact number of staples that I removed from this cabinet, and the person who is closest will win that holiday nut plate that I prepared from the rat's nest that was under the chassis. Well, it's time for our Casey update. She was about 5 pounds when we first discovered her on the porch, and she's gained a couple pounds. She's up to 7 now. She's still a fairly small cat. And I have some news, rather earth-shaking news, from her last trip to the vet, and that is, this is not a 7-month-old kitten. This is a cat that the vet estimates to be 7 to 10 years old. I don't know if she's stunted from malnutrition or what. And if anything, that news about her age made me love her twice as much, because it means that her period of neglect was not 7 months, as I might have guessed, but more like 7 to 10 years, which means she's going to get even more attention and love and food than I'd ever imagined. Okay, so as you can see from this belly, she's doing okay. And really all your PayPal and Patreon contributions have been very helpful on the vet bills. She's had her shots, thorough exams and everything else, and she is really doing well. And she and I both thank you. Good girl. Good girl, Casey. Good girl, Casey. Prowling the porch. There was originally a heavy sheet of aluminum foil attached to the ceiling of the amplifier cabinet, and it was pretty much a wadded up mess and really discolored and filthy, but I managed to clean it up, and then using some weather strip adhesive and a vinyl roller, I was able to get it reattached so that it's nice and smooth and shiny. I believe this originally served as both an RF and EM shield for the amplifier circuit. Now it's time to clean out and re-glue the open joints in the cabinet. I have one on either side of the top and then at the bottom rear. Okay, I re-glued the joints on both sides and then used a large pipe clamp and 2x4s to compress them down. So we'll let this glue dry and harden, and let's focus our attention on fixing up that original handle that goes on top. There, I cleaned up the handle and lightly polished the two trim pieces, and now it's ready to be installed on the top of the cabinet. And here we have the cleaned up handle installed on the recently exposed and cleaned original Tolex material. Looking pretty spiffy. Now while the glue is drying on the cabinet, let's direct our attention here at the chassis. I'm not going to start rewiring it right now, but let's take a look at the cosmetic problems up here on the top. One thing I noticed, and this really isn't purely cosmetic, is that two of the wires here from the reverb tank end abruptly right there, and they look exactly like the wire I found inside. So apparently these wires have either corroded or been nibbled by rodents, but I'm going to have to find where those two wires go and be sure that they are reconnected. Next step here, I've managed to break through the crust of rodent urine, and I'm unscrewing the nuts here that hold the reverb tank into its spring mount. To remove the reverb tank for cleaning and testing, I've got to disconnect these two transducer wires from these lugs right here. Now at the other end, remember the wires were broken and I found that piece of wire inside the chassis. Well, here's where that wire originally passed, is through this open grommet, and here are the two transducer or stubs of the wires that originally came from the transducer at this end of the tank. Now with those two nuts removed and the wires disconnected, we can remove the reverb tank and see that it is the mighty 1011 reverb tank, the very best. Okay, now this can be cleaned up and tested for continuity of the transducers at either end. I imagine they're piezo transducers, sort of like they are in Tysco reverb tanks. It's probably a single spring. We'll see, because I'm going to open it up and we'll take a look. Okay, so this will be something for us to clean up and test. I'll also remove this rusty suspension spring here and maybe bead blast it and paint it so that it looks nice, and then we have a lot better accessibility back here to clean up the rat urine souffle that has been cooked for us over the years. I sprayed a bunch of Windex back here on the filth that has accumulated on the chassis, and now it's time to wipe it clean with a rag and see how it turns out. Well, there's the end result after wiping it clean and then using a little metal polish. I think you'll have to agree it does look a shade better than it did. Okay, now it's time to do the rest of the surfaces. I'm getting a little tired of wrestling and tripping over these miserable cords, so I think I'm going to circumcise them right here and right here. I think in the spirit of the holidays, it's time to include the anthrax Naugahyde, all the electrical cords, and that really nice piece of padding that I took off the cabinet in our raffle. So if you guess the correct number of staples, you're going to get the nut platter and all this. Okay, here's the rear of the front control panel, all cleaned up. I think you'll have to agree it looks a little better than it did when it was encrusted with rat droppings. Now it's time to come over here and work on this side. Also, I've taken the bolts out of the transformer. I'm going to clean up the bell covers. They won't come off because all the wires pass through them, but I'm going to clean them up and maybe paint them. We'll see. Okay, I've done both sides of the chassis, painted the bells here on the old rusty rat-pooped power transformer, and I polished up the top bell on the output transformer. But I think you can see actually now the colors of the wires, and the chassis looks, I think, very presentable compared to what it was like earlier when I first took it apart. Talk about good timing, a package just arrived in the mail, and it's the 3 knobs that I bought from a viewer. All 3, I believe, are better than the ones I have, so once these are cleaned up, they ought to really look nice up on the control panel of the mighty 1485 Silvertone. Alright, I've used jumpers to connect a speaker to the output of the one remaining output transformer. I've got my soldering gun down here right near the output transformer. Let's listen. It seems to me like that output transformer is working just fine. Well, if you've ever wondered what the inside of a Silvertone reverb tank looks like, we're about to find out. I removed the 3 bands of what looks like duct tape that hold the cover to the spring unit, and it is just a cover, nice and shiny. Inside, you can see that those 2 wires come up here. One goes to this piece of folded copper. The other goes over here to what may be a piezo crystal or device of some sort, and it would make this little vertical arm wiggle. That would send a signal down the spring where the wiggling will generate an electrical output at this end, which will be sent into the amplifier circuit. Apparently the piezo portion of this type of reverb system is that little silvery square nut that you see riveted to the masonite board. There's another one over here, and you know how piezo crystals work in a strange way. If you apply electricity to them, they vibrate, and if you vibrate them, they produce electricity. So I believe that's the basis for this tank. One rather worrisome part of this is that neither of these transducers have continuity between the two wires that connect to the transducer. As you can see, there is no measurable resistance here. Now maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. Maybe it doesn't need continuity to work. We'll find out. Since today's work is primarily cosmetic, I cleaned and polished up the reverb tank cover. So we'll leave this miraculous device for another day to figure out if it works and how it works. Well, the wood glue was allowed to dry overnight, and now those unsightly big cracks are closed and sealed up, and I would say virtually invisible. And we have a very, very nice cabinet. I think the finishing touch will be to get some new rubber feet for the bottom. The ones that were on it were not all that bad, but I'm thinking brand new ones would be even better. So our cabinet is rock solid, and soon it will be ready to receive a cosmetically refurbished chassis. Now it's time to clean up this front panel, and that's going to require removing these knobs, which is a whole lot more difficult than it might seem. They are press fit on splined pot shafts, and over the years they've just grown to them. So I'm probably going to have to use a method a viewer suggested, which is 2 spoons, one on either side, and then just sort of jack them out of the front of the plate. Well, with the help of all sorts of cursing and sweating and teeth gritting and C4 explosives, I managed to get the 9 knobs off the shafts. At current prices, this is probably, what, $360 worth of knobs back here. So I better clean them up and then clean up the front panel and then reinstall the knobs. Okay, using a very rare and exotic cleaning material called Windex, managed to get all the grunge off of the front panel. And now I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to use car wax to see if I can't get a little bit of shine and some protection for the lettering. Okay, it's looking all hazy now because of the application of the Meguiar's wax. Notice that the wax also cleaned off a bunch more grunge here when I was applying it. I'm going to let it dry and then buff it and see how it looks. Okay, I buffed off the wax, and it left a really nice sort of a subtle sheen to the metal, especially down here on this the black area. So I'm very pleased with this, and now I'm going to detail the knobs and clean them up and put them back in place. One of the replacement knobs that I bought has a really nice plastic structure, but the disc is just a mess inside that aluminum disc. So what I'm doing is, with one of my broken knobs, I'm continuing to break it in an attempt to extract the disc so that I can then glue it in place over the unsightly disc in the replacement knob. Wish me luck. Using a hot air gun, I'm melting the plastic away from the disc, liberating it from the glue that holds it to the plastic, and hopefully I'm going to get this disc out totally flat and in good shape. And there we go, a nice spun aluminum disc separated from its already broken and badly disfigured plastic knob. Now I'll just install this disc in here, overlaying this really ugly disc. And there you go, from the 2 worst knobs in the whole selection to the single best knob of them all. and I guess it's an $80 knob, but it sure looks nice. Now I'm detailing all the knobs, and to give you an idea how they turn out, this is a before, and here it is afterwards, looking almost like new. So now our nice clean control panel is going to get a nice set of 9 equally clean knobs. A couple of them have a little bit of corrosion on the silver disc, but all in all they, I think, are very presentable, and I have one left over that I can sell on Reverb. Of course I'll have to discount it a little, but this should bring in a princely sum. And there's the finished control panel. Now it's time to turn it around and do the same on the rear panel, and then the cosmetics on the head are done. Well, this rear panel now is all cleaned and polished up to match the rest of the chassis. Now I think that brings an end to the cosmetic repairs on the chassis itself. It's time to put some new feet on the head cabinet and reunite these two for now until I get the replacement output transformer and delve into this jewel to do the electronic repairs that it needs. Okay, I bead blasted that spring mount for the reverb tank, then clear coated it so that it won't corrode again, and polished the screw heads. Now I'm going to reinstall the reverb tank in the spring mount. And there is the reverb tank reinstalled. I also added extensions to the wires that were nibbled over here. I'm passing them through the grommets, and then I'm going to rewire the reverb tank as it was wired originally in the circuit. So now the piezo transducers on both ends of the tank are wired back into the circuit as they were originally, and we'll give this little reverb tank a chance to work when we finally start electronically overhauling the circuit. Okay, the cosmetic restoration on the head is finished. I'm going to put it together and set it aside for now and start dissecting the speaker cabinet. I think it's going to be in a lot worse shape, at least structurally, but that'll be the next step. And here's some good news. I was able to locate 3 good tube shields for the 12AX7, so that's taken care of. Now really about all I need is the missing output transformer. Then once the speaker cabinet is finished, I'm going to take the amplifier out of the case and do an electronic overhaul as if I were starting with a nice, clean, original 1485 Silvertone amp. So I guess that's about it in this first video in the 1485 Silvertone series. In video 2, we will dissect and repair the speaker cabinet, and if that goes well, we might even start the electronic overhaul here on the amplifier portion. I want to give a huge thank you to Steve in Columbus, New Mexico, who donated this amp to the channel and made this video series possible. I also want to say thanks to all the Patreon patrons and PayPal contributors for keeping us on the air and advertising free. As an added feature, I'd like you to stay tuned. I'm going to start a sort of a supplemental series here in which I take a really grungy Chevy 350 engine out of an old truck and turn it into a really snazzy hot rod engine. We'll have episodes at the tail end then of each subsequent video. I hope you enjoy them, and I hope you stay tuned. I'll see you in future videos. Well, it's day 1 on the 350 Chevy crate engine. We pulled it out of about a 76 GMC 4-wheel drive truck this morning. It came with headers, with an MSD ignition, no carburetor, but an aluminum high-rise, an MSD distributor and coil. God knows what the cam or innards are like, or the compression ratio, but it's dirty. It's supposed to only have 4,000 miles. Of course, you know how that goes. It's probably 400,000. But so far, all the discoveries have been good ones. I pulled the plugs, and they look okay, like a decent mixture. I don't see any oil on them or anything like that. So it looks like this may end up being a decent hot rod engine, but only time will tell. Well, I removed a bunch of wires, hoses, chain. That's what we lifted it out of the truck with and all. And I have washed the engine. First I brushed on some grease dissolver, and then just used the regular hose with one of those spray handles on it, and it, I think, came out pretty darn clean. I mean, this isn't exactly show quality, but it's sure looking better than it was. It was mostly just dirt and dust that had landed on it in all the time that it was sitting. So I think step one, things are looking pretty good. Well, it's a new day, and it's back to working on the engine. I had it all covered with plastic because it rained last night, and it stayed nice and dry. And now I'm going to remove all of the accessories off the front end. Okay, now I'm sure they're probably still good. Alternator, power steering pump, water pump hopefully is good, and strip it all off and then clean up the front of the block and check everything out. Okay, I've taken off the water pump, the alternator mount, fan pulley, and the power steering pump and pulleys. And now the front of the engine is fully exposed and everything looks really good. This is unusual to have a breather at the front of the intake manifold. Generally, the breathing's done through the valve covers and you can put the oil in. This is sort of an old style breather position, which will work for me actually, because I have some finned aluminum valve covers that don't have breather holes. So this may work out just fine. Next, I think I'll pull the plugs, squirt some oil into each of the cylinders, and then turn the engine over by hand to make sure that it spins freely. Okay, the plugs are all out, and I've used some turpentine to clean the oil and dirt away from around the spark plug holes to avoid any dirt getting into the cylinders. This is typical of the spark plugs. Oil on the threads, which may or may not indicate some oil in the cylinder, but the mixture seems fine. Electrodes clean. Not bad. Now I can turn the engine over fairly easily with the breaker bar. Naturally, I'd have to pull the rocker arms to relieve the valve spring pressure on the cam to make it even easier, but for now I'm very happy that the engine is free and does seem to spin smoothly. Next, I bead blasted all the plugs to make them immaculately clean. I'm going to put them back into the head just finger tight to keep dirt and moisture out of the cylinders. Okay, the plugs are back in. These headers are not exactly plug friendly. 3 of them had to be removed and installed with an open-end wrench because the socket can't get past the header to engage the plug. Now it's time to drain the water and antifreeze from the block on both sides, and then we'll drain the filthy oil and remove the oil filter. Lots of people think that when you pull the bottom hose on the radiator that you're not only draining the radiator but also the block. And such is not the case, because there are these little screw-in plugs on either side of the block that you have to unscrew and drain all the old sludge and rust and all out of the bottom of the block. Sometimes when you unscrew them, which is what happened with these, there'll be kind of a wall of rust and crud and all that actually blocks the passage. So then you take a pointed, like a Phillips screwdriver, and poke in there and break that wall, and lo and behold, a whole bunch more rust and just nasty water will come out. Then you can squirt water into the passage here for the water pump and cleanse it until you get just nice clean running water. And you have to do this to both sides. They don't communicate with each other, so the other side has to be done independently. After you've disposed of the antifreeze in an ecologically friendly way, and make sure you don't let pets get near it. It's very sweet and they'll drink it and it will kill them. So be very careful how you dispose of your antifreeze. But this is what's waiting sometimes in the bottom of the block. In this case, this is about the cleanest one I've ever seen. You see there's some black granules. It's sort of like panning for gold, I guess, but this is nothing to worry about. I have had engines that would cover the bottom of the pan with scale and rust. So this engine block seems to be very